Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcome you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode I'm sailing out in the Tier 7 Soviet light cruiser known as the Shchors in a Tier 8 standard battle on the map Haven. The focus of today's gameplay is for me to wrap up my original informal review of this ship, link to which available in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now. At the end of that review, back in June 2018, I concluded that I see the Shchors as the background bully of Tier 7 cruisers, whereby she has the ability, thanks to the fantastic range on 152mm artillery pieces, to continuously dump out a stream of hot lead, where it be high explosive armour piercing, and become a real nuisance to the enemy team. But in return, you trade off this capability at long range for a lack of overall pushing power, as while she's a fast ship with a top speed of 35.5 knots, she lacks the overall armour profile and has a very large profile in general to be able to get close and hang in there amongst the bigger ships. And while she does have the 4km torpedoes, which can be very lethal, the fact that you have to trade so much health to get into close range in the first instance is something of concern. So instead, holding back and continuously dumping out fire is going to be the order of the day. But as part of that informal review, I did not have the Tier 4 captain skill Inertia Fuse for high explosive shells, or IFHE. I said I'd come back and take another look at the ship once I've got IFHE, and you're seeing that on screen today. Now, having had the chance to play the ship for a couple of hours with IFHE equipped, I must be honest with you, I've noticed positive results, but they have not been absolutely startling. And really, this gameplay is going to put IFHE, in my opinion, in the context of what you're going to be seeing in the Shchors. And this Tier 8 match is a typical example of how IFHE is going to benefit the ship, but at the same time, not be as beneficial as perhaps one may hope. Now, let's explain what the captain skill does. It's a trade-off. You gain 30% in high explosive shell penetration, but you lose 3% fire chance. Now you can mitigate the downside through the application of the Demolition Expert Captain skill, which gives you plus 2%, and then use the appropriate flags to give you an additional percentage point, and now we're back up to our base fire chance of 12%. So no issue there, we'll set a number of fires. But on top of that, you gain 30% penetration on your high explosive shells, meaning that your high explosive shells, in the case of the 152mm artillery pieces you're seeing here, can go through 32mm of plating now, rather than the base 24mm. Now, against a number of battleships, this is going to be highly beneficial, but unfortunately it's not the same across all battleships. Not all battleships are built with the same deck armour profiles. Now, if we weren't running with IFHE, as I pointed out in my original review, we really do have to start going for the superstructures of enemy ships, simply because we lack the penetration power to get through the deck armour of a number of ships, which lies around the region of 32mm, such as towards the aft and bow ends of the enemy's North Carolina in this game, or alternatively the Bismarcks on the enemy team. But conversely, what we have to consider is when we're facing Tier 8 battleships, such as the North Carolina, such as the Bismarck, these ships have considerably more armour as you go towards the centre deck portion, whereby in the case of the North Carolina it goes up to 37mm, and in the case of the Bismarck it goes all the way up to 50mm. Now, if we were using, say, 203mm artillery pieces on a German cruiser, such as the Admiral Hipper at Tier 8, alternatively the 210mm artillery pieces on the York at Tier 7, we'd find this isn't too much of an issue, because you get the already granted IFHE, which means that your penetration on your high explosive rounds at base is a quarter of your shell calibre, not 1/6, unlike in the case of the Shchors and the vast majority of the cruisers in game. So we don't get any special rules applied here, and as a result we have to know when we're going to benefit shooting at certain enemy ships with IFHE, and when we still have to try and prioritise the superstructure of enemy ships, or aim for very specific regions which may be difficult to hit. Now, on top of that, you'll note that I switched to armour piercing here to shoot at the enemy Atlanta, and one thing I've noted in personal experience of not sailing this ship but other ships with IFHE is that once you do have IFHE, you may start seeing it as a one shell fits all solution to any given circumstance. But here with the Atlanta showing a perfect broadside as they gradually turn away now, we've ripped them to pieces for our first kill. The idea being that when they give us a full broadside for their lack of armour, we should use the right shell type to do the maximum damage. We picked up 3 Citadels, and that's an American light cruiser out of the game before they could really have a massive impact. And now we return to lobbing high explosive at the enemy Bismarck. And what you're going to see is that the number of shatters we get is roughly even with the number of penetrations we get on the high explosive shells. And that's because I'm trying to get my shells to land for the largest portion of the enemy ship where I can actually penetrate with the high explosive and do damage. And that, in my experience, is the superstructure. If I can land shells towards the front end or the rear end of the ship, I will get penetrations now because of IFHE. You saw that on that salvo there, we picked up 2 penetrations towards the fore end of the Bismarck. And then we pick up 2 penetrations towards the aft end of the Bismarck as they go behind cover. And the problem is, if I really want to exploit IFHE, in this game in particular, I'll need to pick on a particular target, and that is the enemy Leon, their French battleship. Because that ship, by comparison, has a maximum deck armour of 30mm, which means IFHE is going to benefit me massively here. The only downside, of course, is that by the time I get the opportunity to shoot at the Leon, what you'll notice, I'm aware of the map, and I'm noting the two Bismarcks that are coming up through the centre right now, and will have a clear shot of my broadside if I continue to dump fire into the enemy Leon. So I cannot afford to focus on that target. And whilst it'd be great to see the damage numbers absolutely pile up, 4 penetrations there, and that wasn't the most accurate salvo by my recognition, I can't afford to focus heavily on that target when I've got other targets coming through the middle that could really turn the game around, and I need to look towards them. So this means that the IFHE being equipped to this ship is not exactly doing massive things for us in this game, simply because we're going up against targets which are able to withstand our shells even with IFHE equipped to an extent. What it means is we have that added benefit that knowing that certain ships that we used to face that would be able to shatter our shells will now succumb to our high explosive shells. And that becomes rather prominent as well when we're looking down the categories towards tier 6 and tier 5 ships, whereby now we have the ability to get through the vast majority of their deck armour rather than small portions of it in the first instance, and that means that the damage we're going to be building over time, particularly against say a tier 5 New York, the American battleship, the damage is only going to rack up massively. So instead I'm resorting to the same standard tactic as what you saw in the original review, which is I keep my range and I keep lobbing in the high explosive whilst my opponents are a long distance away, say in excess of 10.5 to 11 kilometers, because I know I can continuously set fires on these enemy battleships, and once I start to take away their damage control party consumables and then set subsequent fires, their health is just going to bleed down over time. And of course, every so often I will get a better salvo than I did previously because I have IFHE equipped, but it's not a case that we're seeing a massive results as a difference of the skill being in effect. And with the other Bismarck now heading towards our cap at very close range, i.e. relative to our cap, not to our own ship, it means we'll need to switch the target and try to bring them down as quickly as possible as we set another fire. We're already up to 4 fires in this game, and we're not really feeling the effects of the knock-on downside of IFHE taking away 3% of our fire chance, because as explained earlier, we've mitigated that. Now at the same time, I'm keeping my playstyle similar to before. I never want to get too close to enemy battleships in particular because I just do not have the armour in order to withstand the shells. But at the same time, I can feel inclined to be cheeky and show a bit of broadside, whether it be angled or flat for a short period of time, in order to bait the battleships to fire at me. Particularly Bismarcks, simply because they do not have the most accurate guns. They've got rather poor sigma values from what I remember, and at these ranges that's really going to make the difference. And here with the Bismarck showing a considerable degree of broadside, I decide to switch to armour piercing. I get a rather meaty salvo there, taking off just over 3,000 of health, and I go for the finishing shot, but our North Carolina gets it. Well done to them. And you can see again, I'm always having to keep in mind what's the right shell for the given point in time. And that's to reiterate from earlier that you can become obsessed with high explosive just because your high explosive now packs a lot more appropriate punch with the penetration factor of IFHE compared to what it used to do. If you're not lulled into that trap, as I'm personally not being lulled into that trap anymore, then it's only going to benefit you in the long haul. And as for the rest of the game, what we can see so far is that the enemy team have got a destroyer into our base, and they've got a follow-up destroyer coming up through the western approaches, off to our starboard side. And with this Z-23 caught out in the open against our own Z-23, it's really curtains for them, because they're exposed to my ship, they're exposed to North Carolina, they're exposed to our Z-23 and also Richelieu, which means they're going to be absolutely shredded. And whilst I'm not too accurate here, the occasional shell hitting is only going to help deplete their health pool over time, throwing a couple more salvos and eventually they'll be out of the sea. One more, hopefully this should just be enough as they go to their concealment. We'll find out. Bingo, that's another kill in the bag. Now here you notice I push towards the smoke screen set by the other Z-23 on the enemy team. I get my torpedoes ready at first, thinking, well, I can torpedo that smoke screen. And then what I realise is, no, our friendly mast, the tier 7 German destroyer, is charging towards that smoke, and we've also got our Z-23 on the starboard side who may decide to charge into the smoke at high speed. And I don't want to risk hitting a friendly with torpedoes when there's absolutely no need. I've got my bow pointed towards the smoke, so if the enemy destroyer decides to throw their torpedoes my way, I may take one, or I've got a very high chance of dodging them, and they're being pincered on multiple sides here, so there's really no need to accelerate the kill on the Z-23. They've taken out our mast, but that's going to be expected, perhaps because our mast did not have too much health, but they've got the spot off, and now the Z-23 is being continuously spotted, and their smoke is fading as well. It means it's the curtains for them. They're just going to fall, and we can see our barrage of high explosive assist in that regard as the Z-23 detonates. Now again we switch targets and we go back to another battleship, and here's the North Carolina, and we're again going to see an example where IFHE is benefiting us, but it's not causing a massive difference over time. Simply because the North Carolina's deck profile, as said previously, varies between the wonderful section of 32mm as you go towards the fore and aft ends, and then it starts to thicken towards the centre to 37mm, and that also precludes the concept of hitting the turret, which have got considerably more armour than the deck armour, and we won't be getting through the turrets of high explosive. So what I'm deciding to do at this point is start to move towards North Carolina. And if you're wondering why I switched to Armour Piercer at this point, it's not particularly for the North Carolina, it's the fact that we've got a number of enemy cruisers in the centre of the map, or last seen in the centre of the map, and if they are spotted, I'm getting ready to potentially milk their broadsides in terms of picking up citadels. Now making my way back down towards the western side of the map, my idea is I'm going to cut off the North Carolina and harass them at a decent amount of range, say 13km plus, or let them get a little bit closer despite their accurate guns with their 2.0 Sigma, and frustrate the North Carolina in return gradually setting fires and bleeding down their health. Or I should say burning down their health, because that's my overall intention. This game's halfway through, and it looks as though our team's got a numerical advantage, but never say never, the enemy team could bring this back potentially, as they've still got some very powerful assets available to them. And this North Carolina is one of those last key assets in my opinion. Once this is gone, it's pretty much their game wrapped up, because whilst they have a Chapayev and a Bismarck, the enemy Chapayev is right at the front of their team and in an exposed position currently, and the Bismarck is having to deal with our Bismarck and Nuremberg down the eastern side, meaning they're going to a 2 versus 1 with little support, despite the fact they've got a Miyoko gradually making their way as we look on the minimap towards them, albeit it may be too late, or at least that's what I'm thinking. Now with the North Carolina turn their guns towards us, we're having to prove evasive at this point, and in return we'll keep piling on the damage. And we can see shatters and penetrations coming in equal abundance, so I'm not really feeling the effects of IFHE here. But this is standard behaviour anyway, this is what I'd be doing regardless of whether I've got IFHE or not, and this really comes on to the concept of it's not going to change the playstyle of the ship. All it's simply going to do is make sure that you can do a little bit more damage over time, depends on the opponent. The damage may rack up massively against certain opponents, although I've already said that. So now looking towards the enemy Chapayev, who's decided to push in towards our cap, switching to armour piercing here to try and punish their broadside, albeit I've had to hastily throw in that salvo before they became unspotted because they were going behind the landmass, and we do pick up 1 over penetration, so I've got a rough idea of how much lead I'm going to need to give. They reappear, I'm getting ready to fire again, and providing the appropriate lead based on my previous broadside salvo, but they're taken out by our friendly North Carolina, well done to them once again, and that's the enemy cruiser out of the way. So really it's just a case now of the enemy Bismarck being wrapped up against our own Bismarck on the eastern side. Looks as though on the minimap they're actually going to ram, and then we just need to get rid of this North Carolina, and that's the enemy team's pushing power pretty much eradicated as far as I'm concerned. Now I'm closing the distance here to the enemy North Carolina because I appreciate that for them to come around the corner that they're coming around right now, and they're going to need to do one of 2 things. They'll either need to go charging towards our friendly North Carolina, at which point they'll expose a full broadside to me, and at that point I can use my armour piercing to really rip into their remaining health pool. Alternatively, they're going to need to angle towards us all. But they can't do that simply because they're caught in a 90-degree crossfire. So instead, it's most likely they'll angle towards us if they're not angling towards our North Carolina, and then we'll switch back to high explosive. And there we can see a 5,000 damage salvo with some armour piercing really coming in handy as we get some return fire from the enemy North Carolina, hoping it's not going to hit too hard. We're angled a little bit. Oh dear, we did take a big hit there. No citadels, but there were a number of Shchors that went straight in. And again, that's the poor armour profile of the Shchors really coming into effect, as the 406mm guns of the North Carolina can simply overmatch the bow armour from what I can remember. Now the North Carolina continuing to show broadside at the moment. We're throwing in a couple more armour piercing salvos, but as they now start to angle towards us, and the fact of the matter is they're not angling towards us specifically, we could argue they're angling with our North Carolina retreating this way or pulling back this way, so really we're getting into the wrong angle position here. We're not able to set up crossfire anymore. We're using a high explosive and we're picking up a number of fires and doing some regular damage simply because we can aim precisely at where we want our high explosive shells to penetrate as we take some return damage. And it's getting very close to our friendly North Carolina. I'm conscious not to shoot at them because I don't want to set a fire on their wonderful ship or do any more damage to them as needs be. And with the enemy North Carolina now providing a clear line of sight to us, i.e. our North Carolina's getting out of the way, we're able to finish off the enemy battleship for our 3rd kill. That was a little bit tight then. You'll see that I'm going to apologise in chat shortly for scratching our North Carolina's superstructure. Never like to hit friendlies. And this game is pretty much at its end. They've got a degressor that's all the way down towards their cap, very far away. We may be able to sneak the kill if we're very fortunate, albeit if we can't, not to worry. Looks as though they're going to burn down anyway. Ooh, lovely shot from our friendly North Carolina, once again coming in with those accurate salvos, and that's all that's left is a Miyoko on the enemy team, who's on very low health, we've seen previously, and it looks as though they're getting caught in a pincer right now between our Bismarck and Z23. And as we come around the corner here, we're going to have the long range shot, and perhaps we'll be able to pick up a cheeky kill, I should say, right at the end. Can we do it? Bingo, time for the post-game stats. A comfortable victory for our team in the end there, despite a few rough patches along the way. We can see that our personal battle performance amounted to a damage output of 145,402 HP, and that was enough to enable us to pick up the heroic achievement of high caliber, for damage at least 4 enemy ships, where damage calls must exceed 30% of the total health pool of all the ships in the enemy team. Coming on to the team scores, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned, picking up 2,251. As for over the course of this game, we focused specifically on the western side of the map and stuck to our principles as covered in our original informal review of the ship, which were to keep the enemy ships at range and continuously pump out 152mm artillery fire. Primarily high explosive until the distance closed, and then switching to armor piercing where appropriate, but nonetheless racking up damage and frustrating the aim of enemy battleships in particular that were to return fire at such a distance and would have to lead our ship considerably and predict our path in order to get a clear salvo on target. And in the end, that was able to help our team gradually whittle down the battleships on the western side of the map and turn the tables towards victory. Coming on to our detailed report, we have 2 key items to note, both within the damage caused category. Firstly, the apportionment of main battery damage in a roughly 55 to 45% ratio between high explosive and armor piercing. This serves to highlight the importance of knowing which shell to have loaded at a given point in time in order to be able to punish your opposition as hard as possible. The logic here being that if we'd had high explosive loaded against the enemy Atlanta in the early stages of the game rather than armor piercing, yes, we could have done considerable damage, but at the same time they may have been able to live through that damage that we dealt rather than the citadels we scored with armor piercing that put them out of the game. And whilst we did focus on using high explosive at extended ranges in order to annoy the enemy battleships that went down the western side and subsequently set fires, if we continued to just keep chucking high explosive in the hope that IFHE would cure our damage deficit, it wouldn't always work out, particularly when the North Carolina and the Bismarck, both at given stages in the game, showed a broadside to us and it was the right time to switch to armor piercing. The second item to note is in the other category. We set 9 fires and scored 42,286 damage as part of those fires. Again, whilst we dropped our fire chance considerably through the application of IFHE, and we've got it back to the base fire chance of 12%, that's not exactly a problem if we're able to continuously dish out the damage of our high explosive and get continuous hits with high explosive to have the chance of setting those fires on a regular basis, being able to get fires to reappear after our opponents have used their damage control party consumables in order to extinguish them. As the damage builds up over time, fire damage may not seem massive at first, but it does build and it has a contributing factor to the damage output in the Shchors and also the ability to bring down enemy ships as the game progresses. And finally, coming on to credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we walk to have 293,845 silver credits and 3,478 commander experience. To conclude, I would definitely argue in favour of taking IFHE Chief as a tier 4 captain skill for your Shchors captain. Simply put, against certain opposition, particularly battleships with less than 33mm of deck armour all round, you will see an increased number of high explosive penetrations and the net result will be more damage per salvo when your shells are on target. The downside, unfortunately, is IFHE is not going to guarantee these results in every given game, because not all battleships are built equal. Some will have deck armour profiles, particularly in the midsection, going all the way up to 50mm, as in the case of the Bismarck which we saw on screen today. And in these instances you'll be seeing the same old shatters regardless of whether you took IFHE or not. So instead, see it as a means of fine-tuning your gameplay in the Shchors. It doesn't change the playstyle, but it means in the right circumstances, the hurt you can deliver is only going to increase. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking to get into World of Warships today and you haven't already signed up, feel free to use the link in the description of this video to sign up for free. It's an absolutely fantastic game, and think of this, we've only got Royal Navy destroyers coming around the corner shortly. But until next time, as always, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.